Sir, I told you already. You need to leave. Jamal Kingston stood frozen in the grand lobby of the Kingston Grand Hotel, his fists clenched at his sides. He had just arrived in town after a long flight, dressed in a sleek designer jacket and carrying a leather duffel bag. But none of that seemed to matter to the woman standing behind the front desk. The hotel manager, Linda Cartwright, had barely looked at his reservation before shaking her head. "I don't know how you got this booking," she scoffed, arms crossed. "But we don't accommodate walk-ins like you." Jamal's jaw tightened. "Walk-in? I made a reservation a week ago. Under the name Jamal Kingston." He slid his phone across the counter, showing the confirmation email. Linda barely glanced at it before pushing the phone back toward him. "There must be a mistake. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." A few other guests in the lobby glanced toward them, sensing the tension. A couple by the fireplace whispered among themselves, while a bellhop near the luggage cart shifted uncomfortably. Jamal exhaled sharply. He had dealt with subtle discrimination before, the lingering stares, the condescending tones. But this was blatant. He squared his shoulders. "I'm not leaving until you honor my reservation." Linda scoffed. "Sir, I will call security if you don't—" Before she could finish, a deep voice cut through the tension. "That won't be necessary." The entire lobby seemed to hold its breath as a woman in an elegant white coat and diamond earrings stepped through the glass doors. The moment her heels clicked against the marble floor, the energy in the room shifted. Every staff member within earshot straightened up. The bellhop fumbled with his gloves. The concierge, who had been pretending not to notice, suddenly snapped to attention. Linda's face went pale. Jamal turned slowly, his heart skipping a beat. His mother, Evelyn Kingston, had arrived, and she was furious. Evelyn Kingston's sharp eyes scanned the scene in an instant. Her gaze landed on her son, standing tense and defiant, then flicked to Linda Cartwright, who now looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Linda swallowed hard, but she forced a smile, straightening her blazer. "Mrs. Kingston," she stammered, trying to recover. I didn't know you were coming." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "Clearly." Jamal stepped forward, his voice low and controlled. "Mom, I was just trying to check in, but apparently there's been a mistake." Evelyn arched a perfectly shaped brow. "A mistake?" Her voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it, a warning that made even the concierge flinch. Linda laughed nervously, wringing her hands. "Yes, you see, there was an issue with the reservation system and—" "Cut the nonsense!" Evelyn snapped, her patience wearing thin. "I heard everything." She turned to Jamal. "Tell me exactly what happened." Jamal took a deep breath and recounted the last few minutes. The dismissive way Linda had treated him, her refusal to even check his name properly, and the outright demand that he leave. Evelyn's expression darkened. When he finished, she slowly turned back to Linda. "I see," she said, her tone now cold as ice. Linda tried to smile again, but it faltered. "Mrs. Kingston, I was just—" "You were just what?" Evelyn interrupted, stepping closer. "Judging my son based on your assumptions? Humiliating him in front of your staff and guests?" Linda opened her mouth, but quickly shut it. Evelyn let out a slow breath, her fury controlled but lethal. "Tell me something, Linda," she continued. "Do you know who I am?" Linda swallowed again. "Of course. You're one of our most valued—" "I own this hotel," Evelyn said, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. Gasps rippled through the lobby. The bellhop's eyes widened. A couple at the front desk exchanged stunned glances. Even the security guard, who had taken a few steps forward earlier, froze in place. Linda's face turned ghostly white. You own the Kingston Grand? Evelyn nodded. That's right. And my son, she gestured toward Jamal, has just been treated like a trespasser in his own hotel. Jamal watched as realization crashed over Linda like a tidal wave. The powerful, unshakable hotel manager suddenly looked small. Evelyn folded her arms. Now, Linda, tell me, how do you think we should proceed? The entire lobby was waiting for her answer. Linda's breath came in short, panicked gasps. She looked around the lobby as if hoping someone, anyone, would come to her rescue. But all eyes were on her, waiting for her response. She stammered, her confidence evaporating. Mrs. Kingston, I deeply regret the misunderstanding. I assure you, it was never my intention to offend anyone. Evelyn cut her off with a sharp look. Misunderstanding? Are you seriously going to stand here and act like this wasn't blatant discrimination? Jamal crossed his arms. Mom, I don't think she's sorry for what she did. She's just sorry she got caught. Linda's lips trembled. No, Evelyn stepped forward, her presence commanding. Linda, how long have you worked for this hotel? Linda blinked rapidly, her mind racing. So, 7 years, ma'am. Evelyn nodded. 7 years, and yet you still don't understand the core values of this establishment. My establishment. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing that anything she said would only dig her grave deeper. Evelyn turned to the silent staff members who had watched the incident unfold. I hope you were all paying attention, she said, because this is not how guests, any guests, are to be treated here. The staff shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement. Jamal, standing beside his mother, could feel the weight of justice unfolding. But he knew his mother wasn't done yet. Evelyn looked back at Linda. You don't belong in this hotel, not as a manager, not even as an employee. Linda gasped, her face draining of all color. Mrs. Kingston, please. I've dedicated years of my life to this hotel. This was a one-time mistake. Evelyn's eyes hardened. And how many other mistakes have you made when no one was watching? How many guests have you dismissed, turned away, or treated unfairly simply because they didn't look the part in your eyes? Linda's silence was all the answer Evelyn needed. Jamal watched as his mother squared her shoulders. You're fired, Linda. Effective immediately. A collective gasp spread through the lobby. The bellhop nearly dropped a guest's suitcase. The concierge subtly adjusted his tie, relief flashing across his face. Linda stumbled back, her hands shaking. Please, Mrs. Kingston, I have a family. I have bills to pay. Evelyn's expression didn't soften. And how many people have you sent away without a second thought? How many young men like my son have you humiliated and dismissed as if they were nothing? Linda had no answer. Tears welled in her eyes, but she knew there was no reversing this. Evelyn turned to the head concierge. Contact HR. I want Linda's termination processed immediately. Yes, Mrs. Kingston, he said, almost too quickly. Evelyn then turned to Jamal. I believe you had a reservation, didn't you? Jamal smirked slightly. Yeah, I believe I did. Evelyn turned back to the front desk. Then get my son the best suite available, on the house. The staff scrambled to make it happen, while Linda stood frozen in place, her world collapsing around her. As Jamal received his room key, he turned to his mother. You didn't have to do all that, Mom. Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. Yes, I did. This isn't just about you. It's about every person who has ever been treated like they don't belong. Jamal nodded, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. As they walked toward the elevator, the tension in the lobby slowly faded. But everyone knew they had just witnessed a moment they would never forget. Linda, now just another guest in the lobby, stood there in silence, watching as the mother and son walked away, knowing that her downfall had come at the hands of the very people she had underestimated. As the elevator doors closed behind Jamal and Evelyn, the hotel lobby buzzed with quiet murmurs. Some employees exchanged glances of relief, while others reflected on what had just unfolded. Linda, still frozen near the front desk, felt the weight of her actions crushing down on her. The job she had taken for granted, the power she had abused. It was all gone in an instant. The concierge approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Kingston, would you like me to escort Miss Linda out?" Evelyn exhaled, her expression composed. "No need. Let her find her own way out. She's had no problem dismissing others. Now she'll see what it feels like." Linda's head dropped as she quietly gathered her belongings from behind the desk. Every step toward the exit felt heavier than the last. She had been so confident, so sure of her authority. Now, she was nothing more than a woman with nowhere to go. Meanwhile, in the presidential suite, Jamal sank into a plush chair, letting out a deep breath. "That was intense." Evelyn smiled and took a seat across from him. "Welcome to the world of consequences." Jamal chuckled. "I gotta admit, I was about to lose my cool back there, but you handled it like a pro." Evelyn tilted her head. It wasn't just about Linda. People like her thrive when no one calls them out. Today, we made sure she faced the reality of her choices. And maybe, just maybe, she'll learn from it. Jamal leaned forward. "And if she doesn't?" Evelyn shrugged. "Then life will teach her in ways we can't." A knock at the door interrupted them. A hotel staff member entered with a bottle of champagne and a tray of chocolate-covered strawberries. "A small gesture on behalf of the staff, Mr. Kingston," the young woman said with a warm smile. Jamal grinned. "Now this is the kind of hospitality I was expecting." As the staff left, Evelyn raised her glass. "To change." Jamal clinked his glass against hers. "To standing up for what's right." As they took a sip, Jamal looked at his mother with newfound admiration. She had not only defended him, but had also made a statement that would echo through those hotel walls long after they left. Down in the lobby, Linda stepped out into the evening air, the reality of her new future sinking in. With no job and no power, she was just another person trying to find her way. And inside, Jamal and Evelyn enjoyed their well-earned victory, knowing they had made a difference, not just for themselves, but for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong.